Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gorilla Whale, a Godzilla watch-along podcast. I am your kaiju consultant, Kevin Carpenter.
And I'm Kayla Knudsen, the poacher hunting baby Godzilla for sport.
Harsh. Today, we are indeed talking about Son of Godzilla, 1967, the iconic movie, a tentpole in the franchise that for some reason, the metaphor for atomic annihilation needs to be a dad. And this will be repeated through multiple eras.
I just want to say, off the top, I know that its official name, the son's official name, his name is Minilla or whatever. I know this. I will be using the term baby Godzilla.
Okay.
Because Minilla is difficult to say. I don't care.
Most people say Manila.
Just as Grogu is Manila?
Manila.
Like the envelope?
Yeah, like
Absolutely not.
vanilla.
I will be saying baby Godzilla just as I still say baby Yoda. Maybe Babyzilla if we're lucky. But I will not be referring to that thing as Son of Godzilla, which is a mouthful. That's the name of the film. Or Minilla, which I will absolutely stumble over. It's baby Godzilla.
There's also Minya. Turns out this weird malformed Godzilla-like creation has many names.
I hate it. I hate it and all of its names.
This movie, I do not know what to think of this movie, honestly. There's a lot that's cool with it. There's a lot that's cheesy about it. And there's a lot that I don't like. And
I know what to make of it.
What?
This film is like those... Okay, listen. Films aimed at 3-year-olds are still films.
Mm-hmm.
Films for toddlers and young children are important. That media is important. It's not easy to do, but also I don't like it because I'm no longer a toddler. I'm not the audience. That's the audience for this film is like little like 3 to it's like Backyardigans or whatever, in my opinion.
That's the weird thing about this film, though, is that there's also like a good Godzilla film here, but it's spliced together with a film for 3-year-olds.
Well, you have to balance the fact that parents, especially, there's no home video yet.
Yeah.
So parents still have to take their kids to this. And that's kind of why you'll find, I think, there can be disparities between theatrical releases for young children and non-theatrical releases aimed at young children. Although part of that could also be like a lot of the direct to VHS kids movies are low budget sequels that were churned out very quickly following the success of the original film. That being said, I still watched Aladdin 3 more than the original movie. So again, I'm not here to like rag on these movies. They're like they can be incredibly solid. Also, Lion King 2 was so good. Oh my god. But I mean, like, VHS isn't a thing. They need to get the parents in. And I think maybe it's plausible that in the 60s we haven't quite cracked the nut on 4-quadrant family films for a young audience and an older audience at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time that can be enjoyed kind of by both. I mean, when we look at, like, childhood development and the way that adults view and understand young kids, that has changed a lot in the last 100 years. And an evidence of this is in the film itself, because Godzilla's like, yeah, if I step on my kid's tail, he'll work better. Like, stop abusing him.
The funny thing is that like when I was doing research for this movie, I would like see like the trailer for Son of Godzilla or some like research people put together, and then I would look at the comments and there would be people being like, "Oh, I remember watching this movie as a kid. It reminds me of my relationship with my strict father." And I'm like, "I guess good for you, but also damn."
Yeah, I mean, Godzilla's not a good dad in this, to be clear.
Debatable.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Here's the thing. Godzilla is not raising a human. Godzilla is raising a monster on an island full of monsters that from the get-go are trying to eat Manila. I think Godzilla teaching Manila how to do his atomic breath being like the first thing he does, understandable given the circumstances.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. But also, like, if you're a little kid watching this, you're not saying, like, oh, these are not like, you don't understand that. You're like, oh, Godzilla hits his kid as a form of instruction and discipline. So when my dad gets mad at me and hits me, it's okay because that works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, a little kid does not have that level of understanding. And this is, like, indubitably in my opinion, that's a bit of an oxymoron. I think it's a kid's movie. Like, I mean, we've talked about how the Godzilla franchise does kind of skew into becoming a kid's franchise in a lot of films, and this is one of them. And yeah, I mean, it was made in the 60s, though, so I'm not, like, shocked.
Mm-hmm. So, first off, historical context with this movie, by the way, and I'm going to be throwing in little trivia here and there. Not a whole lot of historical context just because they are releasing these films literally year after year, but just some like baseline trivia. So Ishiro Honda and Eiji Tsuburaya, they're busy on another Rankin Bass co-production called King Kong Escapes. That's getting the American money, so they gotta focus on that. So Jun Fukuda is directing this one again, the same director from Ebirah Horror of the Deep. And Tsuburaya's friend / kinda mentee Sadamasa Arikawa is on special effects. He also did special effects with Ebirah Horror of the Deep. Tsuburaya was still credited as like the main like director, but like word from the crew is that he was more of like a supervisory role. But this one is like, all right, Sadamasa, this is his whole shebang. IG is on in another movie completely. Also, screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa complained publicly that he had run out of ideas for monster movies.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's pretty clear. Like, listen, if you get, like, whoever... I feel like I'm about to rag on this movie a lot, but this podcast is, like, a love letter to Godzilla and, like, by and for Godzilla fans. So, a disclaimer, if you like this movie or have fond memories of this movie, especially because you saw it when you were younger or something, that's fine. Like, that's great. That's totally valid. I'm not here to, like, shit on you about that. I mean, I love the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. I saw it when I was a kid. I'm always going to love it. I don't care. I'll say it with my whole chest. That's become more socially acceptable these days as all of the prequel kiddies have grown up. But yeah, here, he did run out of movie ideas. It's not good. It's not good. And that suit is ugly. I'm sorry. It's not. I hate it.
So, fun fact about the suit, by the way, there's 2 different Godzilla suits used for this movie. So all of the scenes...
Neither of them are good.
Yeah, well, all of the scenes where Godzilla is in the water, that is the Godzilla suit from Ebirah Horror of the Deep and Invasion of Astro Monster. And our main man, Haruo Nakajima, who's been doing a lot of the suit acting. We're talking Godzilla, Mothra, like big Toho monster suit actor. He only does those scenes where it's like Godzilla's coming out of the water. And then when they needed Godzilla to stand next to Manila, they needed to emphasize the height difference. So they made another suit, a new bigger suit that wouldn't fit Haruo. So they got a bigger guy, Seiji Onaka, to play Godzilla for those scenes. And he's also a baseball player. And then he broke 2 of his fingers while playing baseball. So they had to get another guy halfway through filming, Hiroshi Sakita, to finish up the Godzilla scenes. Yeah.
Well, the suits are ugly. I didn't like the suits in Invasion of Astro Monster or Ebirah Horror of the Deep. I thought it looked bad there too. And Baby Godzilla's suit is also, I mean, God, he looks like an unrendered Pokemon.
He looks like an ogre from Dark Souls 2.
He's so... How could anybody look at that and think it's cute?
When he comes out of the egg, he looks like a frog that you've left in the microwave for 3 seconds.
He does! We have to really, a round of applause for Lucasfilm for creating a cute Baby Yoda. Because I really do think, like, they could have created a cute little kaiju. We have our logo is a chibi kaiju. It's cute.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's a drawing, not a suit. And it's 2024, not 1967. But good God.
To emphasize, the logo of Digital Kaiju Studios is Digi the Kaiju. The logo for our podcast is an unnamed gorilla whale. We don't push Digi to the forefront enough. We need to do that more.
Yeah, her name is Digi. The Digital Kaiju logo, the little gray thing, her name is Digi. But Gorilla Whale doesn't have a name. His name is Gorilla Whale.
Yeah, there we go.
Like Godzilla is the name of the creature and the species, presumably.
So we're in peak monster movie. Like, we're just in peak monster movie culture right now. There's like 4 separate studios that are releasing monster movies at this time, including one studio that's releasing Gamera, which is incredibly kid-friendly. So Toho's running out of ideas. So Jun Fukuda stated in an interview with Cult Movies magazine, quote, "We wanted to take a new approach, so we gave Godzilla a child. We thought it would be a little strange if we gave Godzilla a daughter, so instead we gave him a son."
What's wrong with Girl Dad Godzilla? But the thing is weird if he like steps on her tail all the time. But he can do it if it's a boy. I do want to say that you know what it is? This will be released in a few months from when it's being recorded, I think. I don't remember what our timeline is off the top of my head right now. But dear audience, the film Alien Romulus is currently in theaters, and Kevin and I went to go see it this weekend. And watching this film, after watching Alien Romulus, I had the thought of, but what if they took Alien in a kid-friendly direction? Because that's what's happening to Godzilla. Like, the original Godzilla film is a balls-to-the-walls horror movie. It's a disaster movie. Like, he's a horror monster, and now he's kid-friendly, and I'm just imagining the xenomorph being kid-friendly.
It's funny enough, the quote about, like, we thought it would be weird if Godzilla had a daughter, so we gave him a son instead. First off, already weird that you're giving Godzilla a son.
Why?
But second off, audience, I want you to pause this podcast in a few seconds, because there is a short film by YouTuber Cressa Maeve Ain, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, called Coming Out, a stop-motion short about a trans kid, and is a stop-motion short about Godzilla supporting his son, who he later discovers is his daughter, and it's great. Check it out. Like, pause the podcast, go on YouTube, just search Godzilla trans, it's the first thing that comes up, and then come back to this podcast. We'll wait.
If you're driving, don't do that. Wait until you're not driving. A lot of people listen to podcasts while they're driving. It's a blob. There's no discernible gender on this child. You could have just called the film Child of Godzilla,
which
or
would have
something,
also
or
worked.
Spawn of Godzilla. Like, that would have worked. And because It's not like I don't believe the human characters at any point in time really mention the gender, it doesn't. Not to get all woke mob or whatever, but, like, it really doesn't matter in this movie. It really doesn't matter in this movie at all what gender the strange baby Zilla is. Like, it doesn't. It's a goddamn blob.
According to director Jun Fukuda, it mattered.
But that's what's weird about it. That's what makes it weird, is that to him it mattered. And I'm like, how? Why? But the other thing, too, it's interesting, actually, because there is this thorough line, actually. There's a very strange, the gender studies that you could do off of this movie, actually. Because when we get into it, what's the name of everybody's names? The girl and then the reporter guy.
Oh, the reporter is Goro Maki, and then the girl is Psycho.
Psycho? Oh, I thought my subtitle said Reiko.
No, Psycho.
Oh, well, HBO Max's subtitles used an R. Okay, so Psycho and Goro, which, naming her Psycho, I mean, I know it's in Japanese, but interesting. So Psycho and Goro have this whole running thing, this running bit in the movie where she's constantly questioning his masculinity and asking him if he's a boy or a girl. I don't know. It was just like she's like, you can't be a boy because you're wearing the color red. And I was like, she was raised in this tropical island outside of civilization. Where is she getting her gender constructs here? Like, what? It felt like so...
I did appreciate the outfit she was wearing, though, with, like, the red Hawaiian shirt and the pants after she stole everyone's clothes. I was like, damn, I need to steal that outfit. Just like she stole it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make, like, a mountain out of a molehill here, but it was just, like, these comments just kind of felt out of place. you know?
These comments reeked of gender.
Yeah. It was very funny that she kept, like, I was just like, why does she's like been raised in isolation. And she's like, I can run faster than you. You're not a man. I was like, what? That combined with it's that, especially in the context of the director being like, well, Godzilla can't have a girl, he has to have a son, that I'm like, what the fuck? Like I'm just like, what's going on here? This is so beyond like the point of anything.
Well, we're starting to get into like the events of this movie, so I think we should jump into the summary here, and then maybe while going over the events of the movie, we can figure out the gender agenda of Son of Godzilla.
I don't. This movie. Go. Okay, just tell him what happened.
A passing plane in a storm suddenly runs into radio interference and Godzilla. But the interference isn't coming from Godzilla. Instead, it's coming from Solgel Island, and Godzilla is heading straight towards it. On Solgel Island, a team of United Nations scientists are working on a secret project to control climates in order to aid food production. Their experiments are hampered by three things: radio interference, praying mantises the size of man, already terrifying, and a freelance reporter named Goro Maki. Goro somehow found out about the secret project and airdropped himself directly onto the island. Instead of these top-secret UN scientists either killing him, imprisoning him, or at the very least destroying his cameras, they instead reluctantly hire him as a cook. Guess they'll just deal with the whole top-secret thing later. Goro meets the rest of the crew, including top scientist Dr. Kasumi, enthusiastic assistant Fujisaki, stir-crazy Furukawa, and like 4 other people who don't really matter that much. Goro also sees a mysterious woman swimming in the waters, but the woman disappears before he can take a photo of her. The team readies their experiment, but the same radio interference from earlier causes the experiment to go haywire. The island is bathed in intense heat and radioactive storms for 4 days, which cause the man-sized praying mantises to turn into even larger giant monsters called Kamakuras. The Kamakuras attack a dirt mound and reveal a giant buried egg. Never a good sign in these movies.
No, never. Everything's he's fucking buried. Their eggs are bad. Buried creatures also bad. Storms at sea bad. Climate weather shenanigans also bad. Lots of bad signs.
Mm-hmm. We cut over to the science crew debating on whether to continue the experiment or leave the island, with Furukawa wanting to leave and Fujisaki wanting to stay. But when they hear noises outside, the crew finds the mystery woman stealing their clothes before she disappears into the night. We cut back over to the Kamakuras, who are still breaking open the egg. I want to place special attention on this editing, because cutting from the Kamakuras during the day, and then the crew at night, and then back to the Kamakuras during the day, implies they've been attacking this egg for like 24 hours. At least a full day-night cycle.
I think it's really considerate of you to assume that that's what's happening instead of it just being a low-budget rushed movie with shaky continuity.
Listen, I am looking at this movie as it is presented, and as it is edited and presented, these useless giant praying mantises, 3 of them at once, take 24 hours to break open an egg. Anyway.
But are you gonna call them useless when they attack the base and crush you?
Yes. Anyway, these useless mantises finally break open the egg, revealing a baby Godzilla, who will later be officially named Manila or Minya, depending on what your region is. At the same time, Furukawa attempts to run off the island in a panicked haze, only to spot Godzilla coming ashore. Godzilla walks through the scientists' camp and destroys all of their equipment and buildings before making his way to Manila. The scientists deduce that the radio interference earlier was actually some kind of psychic signal sent from Manila to Godzilla.
Fucking telepathy? These bitches have telepathy?
These bitches have telepathy. Godzilla shows up and immediately beats the hell out of the Kamakuras. It is brutal. He is slamming them against the ground. He is lighting them on fire with his atomic breath. Only one of the Kamakuras survives by just flying away. Godzilla now has an infant he has to take care of, but he is not good at it. He's confused that the newborn Manila can't walk already. He accidentally slaps Manila with his tail multiple times, and continuing the trend from Ebirah, Godzilla is more interested in catching some sleep rather than this strange monster child. He does attempt to teach Manila how to use his atomic breath, but Manila can only blow atomic smoke rings, which are somehow both lame and cool as hell.
Yeah, how I know, right? Like I'm like, oh, sick, atomic smoke ring, but this baby has no riz.
Yeah. There's also, like, Godzilla steps on his tail, and then he's able to do, like, a little atomic breath, and then they, like, celebrate, like, yeah!
Yeah, I mean, you taught your son how to ride a bike. You smacked him around a bit to do it, but you did it.
Yeah! Reporter Goro eventually finds the Mystery Girl's cave hideout. The girl reveals herself to be Saiko Matsumuya, the daughter of a scientist who had been working on the island and then died several years ago. Saiko opens her cave home to the rest of the scientists who had their entire camp destroyed by Godzilla earlier. This turns out to be very good timing, as a few of the scientists have now fallen ill with Solgel fever, and only Saiko knows how to get the cure. While they gather the cure, Saiko explains that she struck up a friendship with Manila by offering him fruit. She also warns that the island is home to a giant spider monster known as Kumonga, but I'm sure that won't come up later. Never mind! A Kamakura attempts to eat Saiko, and Manila attempts to rescue her. We watch the most pitiful fight between a baby lizard and the world's most useless praying mantis. During the fight, rocks fall into a pit, and Kumonga awakens. Manila and the Kamakura flee. Kumonga sprays Saiko and Goro with webbing, and the two barely make it out alive with the use of Goro's lighter burning away the web. Things are looking bleak. Furukawa is going even more insane, at one point threatening everyone with a gun before passing out. The island is also filled with giant monsters trying to eat them. The scientists finally call for aid from the UN to get them off the island, but they know they won't be able to leave without a last-ditch effort. Setting up whatever equipment they have left in the cave, the scientists begin the weather-changing experiment once more, this time to create a blizzard and freeze the monsters. But as they're starting it up, Kumonga reaches into the cave with a giant spider leg and attempts to eat the humans inside. A giant monster fight breaks out literally above their heads. Manila attempts to fight Kumonga, but is defeated by Godzilla's famous weakness, sprayed silk.
Yep.
The Kamakura also shows up, and Kumonga takes it down and stabs it with a poison stinger, killing it instantly. Encased in webbing, Manila calls out for his father, who finally wakes the hell up and gets off his ass to fight Kumonga. The weather control experiment launches successfully, and a massive blizzard breaks out over the island. Godzilla fights Kumonga within the falling snow, but even he can't overcome being sprayed with silk and stabbed in the eye. Only by Manila joining in on the fight can he prevail. I sound tired there, and it's because I'm tired of this concept, but the following scene is actually cool. The two launch a dual father-son blast of atomic breath and destroy Kumonga.
I mean, Godzilla... I mean, he needed help to take down Ghidorah.
Yeah.
That there's an entire movie that he needed to use teamwork to take down King Ghidorah. But also the concept that a Godzilla who could take on King Ghidorah needed a 3-day-old Godzilla to take on a giant spider. They really nerfed him in this one.
I do appreciate that when he's fighting the Kamakuras, he just wipes the floor with them. Like, Godzilla doesn't even break a sweat. He just kills them all immediately. Well, sure. But the giant spider, he has a problem with.
And, listen. It's for the plot of father-son bonding, I suppose. You know, I get it.
Let's wrap up the movie here real quick.
This feels like a Nick Jr. version of Godzilla. This is like if they did like if Young Avengers was a cartoon where all of the the Young Avengers are like little kids, you know, and the Avengers needs the young Avengers help or whatever, because and you're like, why? And it's like, because it's a Disney Junior. It's Disney Junior, right? It's Nick Jr. and Disney Jr.
I don't know if Disney Junior is official branding, but let me wrap up the movie real quick before we get into the analysis. I got one more paragraph.
Yeah.
The human crew escape the island and board a UN submarine during the chaos. Godzilla turns to also leave the island, but the intense cold and incredible snow cause Manila to collapse because he's a 3-day-old infant.
Mm-hmm.
Unwilling to leave this strange child in the cold, Godzilla embraces Manila in a hug, and the two fall asleep in hibernation. So yeah, Kayla, what'd you think?
Oh, and then the U.S. submarine comes and saves all of the scientists.
Yeah. The UN submarine comes in, and just for a moment, they do like the thing where it's like the water's parting, and it's like, oh no, something big is coming out of the water. And for a split second, I was like, wait, hang on, is Ebera going to be in this movie too? And then it's the UN submarine. Everyone's like, oh, thank God, it's not another giant monster.
Could you imagine how funny it would have been if Ebera came up and just like snapped that boat in its claws and ate everybody after all of that?
I'm just imagining like Ebera coming back and he has his claws, but he also has like giant bandages around his lobster shoulders because Godzilla ripped off his arms in the previous movie.
Well, can they regenerate limbs?
I have no idea. I do not know if lobsters can regenerate entire arms.
Well, a lot of creatures can, but I don't know. I don't know if lobsters can.
It wouldn't be...
Could Godzilla?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Later iterations of Godzilla. I don't know if we've seen a lot of, like, regeneration from this Godzilla. I think we've just seen Godzilla tank a lot of damage, but I don't think we've seen any of the, like, Deadpool, Wolverine, like, regeneration that we see in later Godzilla movies.
Well, no. Like, I mean, if you rip a lizard's tail off, it'll grow back, I mean.
Yeah.
So if you rip off baby Godzilla's tail, it'll grow back.
And to be fair, Godzilla has both of his eyes in the next movie, so at least that regenerates.
Okay, but regrowing an eye, I feel like, is a lot harder than regrowing a tail. Like, damn.
Oh, yeah. So we'll say Showa Godzilla also has regeneration in these movies, but I don't think they have the budget to show off a costume regenerating itself. We can say whatever we want.
What's Ishiro Honda gonna do? Tell us no, he's dead.
No, and Ishiro Honda, he's not involved in this movie. He's working on King Kong Escapes.
Yeah.
I think that's the movie where King Kong fights a giant mecha King Kong. The main thing with this movie, the thing that makes me confused about how I feel about this movie, like I said at the beginning, where it's just like, there is a good Godzilla film here, and it's genuinely kind of scary. You have these scientists who are working on this big project that they themselves admit that if it falls into the wrong hands, it could lead to like just worldwide winter. And then they're already feeling cabin fever from being on this island that's filled with human-sized praying mantises, and then their camp is destroyed, their equipment is destroyed, there's giant monsters that are just trying to eat them all the time. One of them is going crazy and pointing a gun at everyone, and just, like, this is a genuinely horrifying scenario. But then during the movie, we'll cut over to Manila playing jump rope with Godzilla's tail, and then the tubas start playing. Like, literally, it's like, oh no, Kumonga's gonna try to eat us. Cut over to Manila.
It's literally like nursery or circus music happening every time this guy comes on screen. It's so deeply unserious. I do want to, speaking of the climate change weapon, it's
not meant to be a weapon. They're trying to change the climate for food production. They want to grow vegetables in the desert.
But it can be used as a weapon. And I do think it is kind of interesting here. I wrote, famine being called a more terrible, powerful weapon than a nuke, because they do directly compare it to the nuclear weapons. I do find that very interesting, like, considering nukes are new, but famine is one of humanity's old standbys when it comes to weapons of war and destruction. It's famine. Like, famine has been a very, very old tool. And I do think it is really interesting that we are a little over 15-ish, 10-ish? Hold on. 1967, 1945. Okay, so we're like 12 years out from the end of World War II, which, of course, saw the only action of nukes in war thus far. And also, lots and lots and lots of famine all over the battlefields against the civilians and whatnot. And so I bringing like famine in and saying it's like a worse weapon than a nuke. Yeah, true. Like, so true. And it was just an interesting sort of I don't know, it was like the one interesting thought in this movie was talking about like famine and its usage in war as a weapon, considering that we still see famine used to this day, and we probably will always see famine used as a weapon of war, but nukes is not something that we like touch upon that much. Like, I mean, we fear nuclear annihilation, but for that reason, it has stayed anybody's hands so far.
Yeah, we're very much living in a post-Cold War
I hope this
world.
doesn't age poorly. We're what?
We're very much living in a post-Cold War world.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it's just like I kind of wish I could have seen the Godzilla movie where it is just the plot of like the scientists on the island and then them trying to mess with forces beyond their understanding leads to them to fucking up the weather of this island and creating giant praying mantis monsters. And then Godzilla shows up and they're just like trying so hard to science their way off of this island while the literal giant examples of their hubris are trying to kill them. It's just every time, like I said, every time we cut to Manila, it's a completely different movie.
Yeah. The other thing about this, they somehow have the exotic native woman trope without her technically being an exotic native woman.
Yeah, they do a Tarzan thing where she's a Japanese woman who was left on this island.
Yeah.
So we finally get an exotic woman that isn't a Japanese person in blackface. It's just a Japanese person who's tan.
Yeah, it's still squicky. That's what I said. They called it Spooky Island, and I wrote, before they even called it Spooky Island, I was like, this is the reporter, Goro, he says, God, he's so silly. He's such a kids movie character. He's like, oh, my stomach growls whenever I find a good lead, and my stomach is growling a whole bunch, so I'm not leaving until I get the story of what's going on here. And I just wrote down, his stomach growls to lead him on to good investigations and find the truth. Is he Scooby-Doo? And then like 2 minutes later, they called it Spooky Island, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is a Scooby-Doo episode, but like a bad one.
One thing about Goro Maki, by the way, is that name will show up in 2 later Godzilla movies as a sort of callback. In the 1984 Godzilla and in Shin Godzilla in 2016 as like an off-screen scientist like mentioned in like a little document. So like a little blink and you'll miss it Easter egg.
That's fun.
So apparently this character was important enough for later Godzilla movies to call back to him.
Well, that's fun. There's also going back, sorry, to the climate tool thing. Like their big concern about controlling weather is having enough food to feed everybody, so we get some 20th century overpopulation anxiety, which I think has kind of calmed down a little bit as we come into the 21st century. It's not that we still don't have like anxieties about, most of our anxiety is about climate. It's less so about overpopulation. The Earth can pretty comfortably sustain like upward like 10 billion or more people, really, pretty comfortably. The issue, I mean, we throw away like so much food is the huge problem. But in this movie, one of the scientists refers to like unfarmed wild land as useless. Fucking hated that opinion, I should say. Like that's a terrible, terrible stance.
Oh yeah, the idea of we're going to take like the Sahara Desert and we are going to change the climate so that way we can grow food there. It's like, that's still like a biome, right? Like there are animals that have to live in that biome.
That's the thing about, and maybe it's because I grew up in a desert or whatever, but people are like, oh, deserts are useless land. Like, nothing grows there. There's no life. I mean, I grew up in the Sonoran Desert, which is the most biodiverse desert in the world. Like, it's beautiful out there. And there's tons of animals and life and, plants and stuff. And we still grow food there. Just... You shouldn't turn the entire desert into a farm. Jesus, listen, here's the thing about the Midwest. It's all fucking farmland out there. You've been out there.
Yes, I've lived in the
Midwest. And every time I go to the Midwest, I'm just like, wow, look at all this farmland. Out west? No. there's a lot of wild country out west.
Mm-hmm.
It is not all flat farmland. It is still wild out here. And it should stay wild. Donate to your national parks systems, everyone. What was it? Oh, yeah, okay. Also, the fundamental thing about this movie that really does make it a kids movie, in my opinion, is that it is all eat your veggies propaganda and do your homework propaganda.
Interesting. Okay, so the eat your veggies propaganda, I don't know if I agree with that, because the one scene where it's actually like, hey, Goro is now the crew's cook because they can't kick him off the island, I guess. He has like one scene where he's just like, all right, so I'm rehydrating some vegetables, and it turns out he's using some water that another crew member used to like clean his boxers. So he just washed a bunch of lettuce in some ball sweat.
And they still eat it.
Yeah, they still eat it. Because what else are you going to do, I guess?
I'm sorry, did you miss the part where Psycho was feeding Godzilla fruit?
Oh, yeah, you're
and
right.
Said,
but that's fruit,
eat
not
this,
veggies.
it'll make you grow strong.
Oh, there we go. You're right.
And baby Godzilla is clearly supposed to be the character that all of the children identify with. And she's constantly feeding him like fruits and being like, you need to eat this so you grow strong. And then later, they're like, oh, he's studying, as they observe Godzilla, like teaching baby Godzilla. And it's like, his dad's such a study nut, you know, and like he has to study and learn. It's do your homework and eat your veggies propaganda.
They call Godzilla something akin to like a tiger dad, and I'm just like, God, this movie is incredibly Japanese.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. The other thing, I read Soulgel as Soulgel on my subtitles, and I just thought Soulgel sounds like a hair product from the 2000s. And absolutely, there's a like sub product line that the Jersey Shore cast advertises for, and they call it Shore Gel. And it just has like a picture of the situation's abs on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just Shore Gel by Soul Gel. But then you said Soulgel, and I was like, oh, that's less fun to me.
I try to do my best with the pronunciations of this stuff, but also something that I keep running into with these movies is the whole like translation feature of like words in like R's and L's from Japanese to English will just get like switched around. Like that's kind of the whole Gojira Godzilla kind of thing. And so like the official pronunciation, at least in like English, is like Soulgel, but then like during the movie they pronounce it as like Sorogeru or Sorogero or something like that. So, you know, it's just like I just have to pick a pronunciation for some of these things.
Oh, yeah, I see. I guess on Wikipedia, yeah, it's Psycho, but the subtitles I saw gave her name as Reiko. So
That's what I'm saying. And it's like, I think they pronounce it like Psycho, which I love. Psycho, by the way, great character. I love that they went like a Tarzan route with her. I think she looks great when she steals like the crewmates' clothes. I think that it's cool that it's like, hey, my scientist dad lived on this island and then he died and I had to kind of raise myself on this island. And also he was eaten by the giant spider, which is why I know about Kumonga. So it's like, all right, cool. We have the human stakes tied directly to the monster stakes. We don't do a whole lot with it. We really just kind of use that so Psycho has an excuse to know the giant spider's name. But other than that, I mean, like, hey, at least they're trying here. I'm remembering, like, Ghidorah, where the sunglasses wearing assassin Malmes had nothing to do with the giant monsters.
Yeah.
They just kind of kept happening in the background while he was trying to do his job.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. Like, I mean, it's a cohesive movie. It's not cohesive. There's been less cohesive Godzilla movies, but also this one, I was just like, I was not attached.
That's the thing with this movie. It's like the presentation is cool. Like technically it's cool. Like the marionette work on both the Kamakuras.
The sets were really good.
Yeah, the sets are really good. The marionette work on like the Kamakuras and Kumonga the spider, like especially as it's moving and all of its legs are moving at once. Like they had like 20 crew members working on Kumonga at one time, like pulling strings from the rafters, their sweat dripping onto the costume. And it looks great. Mm-hmm. I will say there is one scene when Godzilla is beating the hell out of the Kamakuras that like Godzilla picks up one of them and like flings him into the air and drops him onto the ground. And as the camera is following him, you can see the studio lights for a hot second. That made into the final cut. but also that is immediately made up for with like the following like 5 seconds where Godzilla shoots one with his atomic breath, and then like the praying mantis arm while on fire flies through the air, and the humans look at it like, damn.
Yeah, the effects in this movie are good. The fights when they get going I mean, because the effects are so good,
Yeah.
that helps the fights. I will say there is one bit, just as there was a volleyball match in a previous Godzilla movie because of the recent Olympics at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a soccer match I noticed in this one. So I do wonder if perhaps the Japanese soccer team had won some sort of competition recently, or if perhaps this is just one of those things that because it's totally aimed at kids, they kind of put in, some like game, like
some
sports
rock
and
tricks,
game stuff.
Yeah, I did notice the Kamakura's like batting the rocks between their claws before throwing it at Godzilla. It was kind of like look at it, bam.
Yeah, they were dribbling.
Yeah, they were
dribbling the ball before chucking it at Godzilla, and then Godzilla's, passing it back, and then they're passing it back, and then the rock hits baby Godzilla in the face, and I cracked up. I was like, get his ass.
Official statement. We here at Digital Kaiju Studios do not condone child violence. We do, however, find it hilarious.
Yeah, I find it absolutely hilarious that this puppet baby that is ugly and malformed is getting absolutely... It's so ugly! It's just... I don't like it. It's not cute. It's not... The mantises look so good.
Yeah.
The spider looks so good. And then we kind of have, like, one of the janky Godzilla suits, and then... The Son of Godzilla costume is just it's just sort of smooth.
And we have two of the Manila costumes, because like one of them is like the newborn frog in a microwave look, and then like after that we have like the little bit larger but still looks like an infant Manila costume.
Yeah, and I'm okay with the like newborn ugly frog thing, because like, have you seen a newborn baby?
Yeah, it makes sense.
That shit's an alien creature, but I think it's the fact that, like, I know that they could make, like, their effects team can do such wonders, and then on the main fucking character, it's not, like, good,
I couldn't 100% confirm this, but there was a rumor that they modeled the Manila costume after a like chibi character in the manga Osamatsu-kun. So another way that Osamatsu-kun has directly influenced the Godzilla franchise.
I mean, sure.
Yeah.
I guess that could be the problem with sort of being referential to other pop culture or taking your cues from other things that are popular. I mean, other things fade, and then it's like,
then you're just left with Manila.
Yeah, like I'm left with baby Godzilla, Manila, Minya, whatever, without context of like what it's supposed to be referencing, and the creature itself just kind of doesn't look very good. I don't like the design, and yeah. And again, I mean, I'm not a kid. Like, this is aimed at like very young kids, and I'm not a kid, so the movie's not for me, and I cop to that. I'm not the audience, so yeah, of course I was not compelled by it.
Well, even then, like, I still find The Iron Giant great. I still find The Incredibles great.
Exactly.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that's marketed directly toward kids that are still great movies. It's just, this one is just like what I was saying earlier, this movie is technically great, and there's some good elements here, but the core concept itself, Godzilla randomly becomes a dad. It's like, I don't know how well you can present that and still make the concept good.
Yeah. And there's like good, and yeah, to be clear, there's a lot of movies, kids movies, that I loved as a kid and love now, or discovered as an adult and love. I mean, like Miyazaki's entire filmography, basically. I still love Lion King, kids movies can be good. Kids movies can be really, really good. And that's the other thing too, on the flip side, is dismissing kids movies because they are just for kids, and thus that concept that they don't have to be good. I've said this before on the podcast. Kids are hard to write for. Like, a kids movie still needs to be good. Like, judging it differently based off of it being a kids movie or not being a kids movie is a little ridiculous, because kids still deserve good art just as much as adults do.
Well, we come back to that Honda quote where he's like, kids won't tolerate silliness. And it's like, well, here's Son of Godzilla. Manila is playing jump rope with Godzilla's tail while the tubas play.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm like, this almost just feels like the sort of thing that you kind of put on for like a toddler to kind of entertain them for 5 minutes while you do the dishes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Godzilla has a body count. Godzilla is still a metaphor for atomic annihilation, and now he has a child.
God. Listen, you can't make, that's the thing. We talk about how there, like, the spectrum of Godzilla and how Godzilla has been and represented, so many different things. And it's kind of like how Batman can like be goofy and can also be like really dark.
Mm-hmm.
So Godzilla is sort of being stretched that way, but I think sometimes it doesn't work. And this idea of like taking the Godzilla character in these directions, it does kind of dilute Godzilla a little, and I think it goes kind of into this larger thing about franchises. And at some point I'm like, just make a different character for this movie you want to make, rather than bringing in like the metaphor for ultimate atomic annihilation into this father-son thing, and he's the father. Like, there's something much larger and more poignant to be said about how Hollywood has always taken IP and then tried to shove one IP into the story they want to tell, because they think they need the IP to get seats or to get butts in seats. And so they force that IP into something it isn't, because they want to make this movie. You know what I mean? You
mean like when they made a King Kong movie and then they didn't have the rights to King Kong anymore, so they just slotted Godzilla into it?
Yes, exactly. Just like that. But my point is, this is kind of a conversation that we're having in modern filmmaking in Hollywood and the global movie industry about this concept of forcing IP like onto plots and stories that it doesn't initially work for, just because everybody's like, we need IP, we need IP, we need IP. And then it's like people go and see this movie sort of expecting one thing and getting another thing, because you're forcing a square peg into a round hole. We've been doing that. Yeah. Like, it's not new. It's not a new problem. It's been happening since at least 1967, and like you said, I mean, it was a King Kong movie and they made it a Godzilla movie. Like, it's been happening.
And we're in that like peak moment in the Showa era as well, where Godzilla is just kind of thrown into everything. There's a TV show that he'll just get like randomly thrown in. Godzilla versus Megalon, which we'll get to later, originally wasn't supposed to be a Godzilla movie, but like I said, we'll get into that later.
Oh boy, Jesus. Well, look at how they've massacred my boy.
God. Well, I was watching this with my fiance, and as we were watching this movie, she was like, so is this where Godzilla jumped the shark? And I'm like, do you not remember the dance? Do you not remember Godzilla body slamming King Ghidorah and going like, sure?
Yeah, the meme TikTok dance of Yield in Time was absolutely the sharp jump moment.
So we kind of skip over this because this movie just makes us tired. But I can't believe they got away with like, yeah, Manila's just a random egg on a random island.
Oh yeah.
Like Godzilla adopted Manila. Like, we don't know who Manila's blood parents are. There's no other Godzilla. There's like a rumor in the fandom that perhaps the first Godzilla from the 1954 movie was actually a woman, and then she like laid the egg, and then it took more than a decade for the egg to hatch.
We don't know what the gestation period is on these Godzillas. I mean, they're big creatures. It could take a long time. Also, love the concept of Girl Boss Godzilla being the original horror movie giant monster. Love that for feminism, etc. Did Mothra and Godzilla utilize girl power when they destroyed Tokyo and New Rao City? No,
New Kirk City, I think.
New Kirk City. Where did I get Rao? New Kirk City. The other thing is, though, of course, like, these are like lizard creatures. do some lizards?
Lizards come from eggs, yeah.
Yes, I know that. I know that much, Kevin. Thank you. I was going to say, aren't some like lizard creatures like there's one lizard species that's like all girls. It's like literally like all the guys died out and life found a way, and it's like a lesbian lizard population. I'm not kidding. I saw it on a documentary once.
Well, we know for certain in this movie that Manila is a boy, because Jun Fukuda was like, we can't have a girl Manila. That wouldn't work for this movie. You can't have a daughter.
We keep referring to, well, male is the default, of course. As we all know, male is the default, of course.
Of course.
So we continuously refer to Godzilla as a man, but as he, him. But technically, I mean, how do they determine the gender of these giant kaiju?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had the worst mental image go through my mind of like Godzilla -1 graphics, but they animate the dong. Just, oh god. Takes out a train.
Oh god, Jesus. This is me getting into the whole, like, where is the diet of Godzilla and being excited when he's hunting orca well, how do we determine, actually, the gender and reproductive capabilities and habits of giant kaiju?
Well, here's another thing. Because modern Godzilla hangs on the angle of, like, Godzilla is a product of nuclear radiation. And, like,
yes.
Gojira was, like, Godzilla was kind of, like, woken up, but they don't really go that much into, like, the mutation aspect. I think that's a lot of us, like, taking what we think of from the modern Godzilla movies and projecting that onto the classic ones.
Yes.
But this movie proves that the atomic breath ability inherently comes from this species. Like, Manila was not shaped by a nuclear blast, but Manila is born and then is immediately able to shoot lasers out of his mouth. Well,
that's true.
Atomic smoke rings, but he gets to it eventually.
Well, I mean, I guess you could potentially make the argument that because that potentially this island is close enough that it got some nuclear fallout. It's like, okay, so
well, yeah, and the failed experiment does bathe the island in radiation and turns all the praying mantises giant and useless. So, yeah, you're right.
There is kind of some, like, hand wavy, like, well, he absorbed some radiation, and so it was mutated, etc. It's kind of like there's this thing in, I think, primarily medical devices. They have to use salvaged steel from shipwrecks because they can't use irradiated steel, and post-nuclear weapons, there's a lot of, like, just kind of background radiation from that.
Oh, yeah.
All over the world. But I guess the depth of some of these shipwrecks protected the steel from being irradiated, and we have to salvage that steel to use it for some super sensitive, like, medical machines of some kind. I read that somewhere, and I'm pretty sure it's true. But it's kind of like, the background radiation of nuclear weapons that exists now in the world. Well, Manila, Baby Godzilla, Babyzilla was born in this background radiation world. So, that's kind of why the atomic breath works. It like kind of got through the shell or something, and mutated its genes potentially. But yes, it does. Only more questions have been brought up for me in regards to kaiju biology. How do we know they don't reproduce asexually?
That could be a thing.
Like
we didn't have the all important Godzilla egg laying scene.
Some creatures do. Yeah. Mothra seems to produce asexually.
Also through a kind of reincarnation. Weird.
It's an asexual reincarnation.
There we go.
This does sort of imply the existence of, like, a population of Godzillas somewhere.
Right?
How many of them are the same Godzilla? Or how many are different?
We know of at least 3 now.
Oh god. Okay, we're not diving down the rabbit hole. This we're at the end of the podcast. I'm ending the podcast. Do the ratings.
Cool. Kayla, what would you rate this movie?
1.
Really?
Yeah, and it gets the 1 for the sets and 1 for the interesting ideas surrounding, like, famine, overpopulation anxiety, the climate weapon thing. I thought those things were cool. And like I said, the effects were mostly really good, and the suits and all that, except the Godzilla one was kind of janky and Baby Godzilla was kind of janky. But it gets 1 for, like, effort and technical skill in that regards, but I just hated Babyzilla so much it takes down anything else. Maybe if Babyzilla was like a little different, then I would rate this movie, I would be more generous, but it like took the generosity out of my heart.
I'll do 1.5 out of 5. Like, I wanted to make it higher, but like I said, I just keep thinking about the rest of the movie. But every time we cut over to Manila and the tubas started playing, it just immediately took me out of the movie. Just all the tension taken out. I'm just like,
yeah, like yeah, that's the thing, is this movie is very...
I did like the final scene, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, that was sweet. Them embracing and going into hibernation together or whatever, like, that was sweet. And I do think that you could do a Godzilla, like a Spawn of Godzilla storyline with Godzilla taking like a baby Godzilla under its wing tail. I think you could do that in a way that is true to the tone of like a horrific monster movie. If they kind of went more alien xenomorph with it all.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you really could have, but they didn't. Like, they were.
You know what? No, I'm changing mine. I'm putting it up to 2 out of 5 because I am thinking about like the snowy fight scene with Kumanga, or the fight scene with the Kamakuras, or the actors truly putting their all in. By the way, Yoshio Tsuchiya, the Seven Samurai Redbeard guy who just really wants to be in these Godzilla movies, he was playing Furukawa, the guy freaking out. So stellar performance from him. So you know what? People do care when they're making this movie. The core concept.
I never said that nobody cared.
But yeah, I'm raising mine up to 2 out of 5 because there's an element of they wanted to make a good movie. They just started off on the wrong foot, and that foot tripped them into a giant pit that Kumanga was sleeping in.
Yeah.
So that's my rating. Kayla, tell us what movie we're watching next.
Okay. This is, I knew that Son of Godzilla, because every time you brought it up, you said it in such a tone that was like, you're in for it. I knew this movie was going to be a disaster. Okay. Next, we'll be watching Destroy All Monsters, 1968. Be sure to watch the Japanese language version, not the English version. If you liked this podcast, be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, leave a comment, and share with a friend. Follow us on social media. We got the links in the show notes. We also have a Ko-fi. You can support us there and get access to cool bonus content like extra episodes and access to the private Discord where you can talk with other geeks about Godzilla and all things Digital Kaiju. Check it out. Gorilla Whale is a production of Digital Kaiju Studios. It is hosted and produced by Kevin Carpenter and Kayla Knutson. Gorilla Whale has no official affiliation with Toho, Legendary, or any other companies associated with the Godzilla franchise. We thank you for watching along with us. Until next time, watch out for kaiju.
Watch out for kaiju.